It's my object today. I brought. I'm actually going to save it. I'm going to save telling you what it is, but it's something to do with the human body, and it starts off with straw. We'll get to it in a bit. You gotta wait for that kind of joy.
I'll wait. But as always, you come first. We've got questions you guys have submitted. Thank you for doing that, by the way. They're a blast to read. I don't know how we're going to ever cover all of them. They're all so good.
Here's one that's come in from Kevin. I think this one's from Michael. I often hear scientists complaining on documentaries about maths not working or breaking. This tends to happen when maths encounters zero. So my question is, rather than moaning about maths not working, shouldn't scientists busy themselves making a new maths that doesn't have a zero?
That's what I say every day. Just let's go back to not having zero, and nothing will ever break.
Which is not very long ago, actually. This episode is brought to you by Cancer Research.
So when most people think of naked mole rats, their unusual relationship to cancer probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind.
But maybe it should be, because it is incredibly rare for them to develop cancer, which could be partly down to their unique immune system, or it might be the way that their cells respond to damage.
So scientists are studying their biology or its cancer-fighting secrets. It's a reminder that discoveries can sometimes come from places you don't expect.
Cancer Research UK is the world's largest charitable funder of cancer research. Thousands of scientists, doctors and nurses work across more than 20 countries to help turn discoveries in the lab into new tests, new treatments, and new innovations.
And the impact is clear. Over the past 50 years, the charity's pioneering work has helped double cancer survival in the US, meaning more people living longer, better lives, free from the fear of cancer.
For more information about Cancer Research UK, their research, their breakthroughs, and how you can support them, visit cancerresearchuk.org/rest is science.
When was zero introduced? As a numeral.
So it goes back to, I think it's Brahmagupta, in Indian mathematicians anyway. I mean, they had it for a very long time, and I think that the idea is that it's about sort of the idea of a zero having that shape, that centuries. You're following eternity, right? So sort of state of nothing. But getting to Europe, it took it a really, really long time. It came through the Islamic world, really adopted it, sort of came up through Spain. But people were really reluctant to adopt it. I think Shakespeare was walking the earth before zero was commonly used in Britain.
In like mathematics, because clearly he knew about the concept of nothing, emptiness,
Sure.
not having any. So the reason I wanted to look at this question today was because I've got you here, Hannah, and I wanted to see how you felt too, because that whole phrase, mathematics is broken. It doesn't work. We've discovered a place where if you divide by zero, math breaks. It feels so histrionic, like it's not breaking. And look, as we all enjoyed, I don't know when this is going to happen. I originally picked this question for my zero limericks, but now I did the limericks already. So that's why I was scrambling to find a different question. But division by zero, or, physical singularities causing science and math to break, because you hear that all the time, but it feels like clickbait.
I mean, generally, people say maths breaks when you're dividing by zero, right? Which I guess happens, in high school when you're just presented with it as an equation. But in, much higher level mathematics and physics, there are situations where, in the Navier-Stokes equations, for instance, which model how fluids flow, where you end up with what's known as singularities, where you get some denominator. I mean, usually it basically boils down to the fact that you're eventually divided by zero. You get some denominator that goes really, really small. You get a term that becomes really, really big and just blows up the whole equation. Everything else becomes it shrinks, it sort of pales in comparison to this one particular term, and that the equations no longer work.
So it seems like we don't need to make a new maths that doesn't have a zero. We just need to deal with zeros better. Like, what is the solution to a singularity in fluid dynamics?
I mean, the equations break. You just can't use them.
They break.
Yeah, I mean, they literally break, yeah.
A correspondence between the math and reality ceases to exist?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we need to do to overcome that? I feel like getting rid of zero is the wrong answer, because it's useful in a lot of other circumstances. It seems like we just need a better way of making reality correspond to it. Reality certainly isn't going, oh my gosh, there's a zero in the equation that we're all following. Time to, what, create a rip in space-time? No, the fluid keeps flowing.
I think that a lot of the time, when you're using functions, like the ones that you find in physics, for gravity, they tend to work really well at certain scales. So Newton's laws of gravity work really well if you and I are chucking a ball between each other. But when you zoom out further, they don't quite fit as well. They aren't powerful enough to deal with things at that scale. And likewise, when you shrink down really small, the thing that works on the scale of humans, down at the quantum level, it just doesn't work anymore. So I think the thing about equations breaking, essentially that's what you're describing. You're trying to you've got an equation that works at a certain scale, works in a certain set of assumptions, and you are pushing the boundaries. You're right up against the very limit of what those assumptions can tell you, and that's the point. When a zero gets sort of a rogue zero appears, it's where, exactly as you described, your description of reality departs from the real reality itself. I mean, the other place you get singularities is in black holes, right? It's obviously the physics that we know well, you can sort of move around in, doesn't apply once you get to something that's as dense as a black hole.
Same with Planck volumes and Planck distances. It's well, it seems significant because physics as we have constructed it today doesn't really help us there. Or when we start trying to describe a time closer and closer to the Big Bang, we can only get so close to time zero before mathematics breaks. And I don't know why I don't like that phrase. I think it just goes back to the fact that it feels clickbaity. I think it implies that all of math has been wrong the whole time. When in reality, we're modeling reality really well with math, but there's some fundamental small scale in the universe where the universe does something different. I mean, maybe we just need to discover zero in real life. Not emptiness, but a mathematical zero.
Mathematical zero in real life, what would that look like?
Well, it would look like what happens in the singularity of a black hole. We don't know how reality deals with it. And our equations certainly don't. But when it comes to the grade school stuff about division by zero, my opinion is that division by zero is just not division. Because one way to think of division is that it's repeated subtraction until nothing is left. But if you're subtracting zero over and over again, you're not actually subtracting. It's like saying, what's 2 plus tuna fish? Well, one of those isn't a number. So there's no mathematical breakage. You've just made a joke. But zeros that we find in our equations describing reality aren't jokes. So, Kevin, I don't think the answer is a maths without zero. I think the answer is understanding real zero.
Can I tell you my favourite thing about that answer?
Please.
That the way I've never heard Planck pronounced Planck before. I really enjoyed it.
Is it Planck?
I don't know, I get it wrong all the time. Someone sent me a message the other day. We were talking about air dosh the other day, and someone sent me a message saying it's air dish. We were saying it wrong apparently. There's Euler was how I thought his name was pronounced, but apparently it's Euler. So I don't know, maybe it is Planck, but from now on I'm going to call it Planck because I think that sounds much cuter.
It always just felt a bit more European. Planck. Planck sounds like a trend from 2007. And I've heard it both ways, I guess. You know, whenever I'm going to say something in a script that I've prepared, I look up how it's said, and I look up how other people have said it.
Yeah.
You can't always trust what Google says the pronunciation is or what YouTube videos do. I will look at like the OED or Merriam-Webster, and I'm like, look, if they say it's that way, then I'll blame them. But yeah, I for the longest time have always said the Planck distance. But Planck distance, is that what you say?
I say Planck. But, you know, who knows? One thing I will say is that, as well as Merriam-Webster, the Oxford English Dictionary, those pronunciation guides, when you work for the BBC, they actually have a pronunciation unit where there's a phone number that you can call. You call up that number and you ask how to pronounce a particular word. It's especially useful when you're making science documentaries.
Yeah.
Anyway, one of my favourite games is to call them up and say, hello, is that the pronunciation unit? They bite every single time. Anyway, there's an interesting story about what happened once. There was a very good friend of mine, Jim Alcalini, who is a physicist, a British physicist who makes amazing documentaries in the UK for the BBC. Anyway, he was out on a shoot, and there was a particular word that came up that nobody on the shoot knew how to pronounce. And he said, oh, you know what, I'm not sure, I think it might be this, but I'm not completely sure. Let's call the pronunciation unit. They call it the pronunciation unit. They get an answer. Half an hour later, they call them back, have an answer. So they record that on tape. That's what goes out on air. Anyway, the next day, Jim is in his office in Surrey University, and he's still wondering about this word. So he goes next door. To one of the physicists down the corridor, and he says, oh, you don't know how to pronounce this word, do you? And his colleague says, funny you should ask. Yesterday I got a call from the pronunciation unit at the BBC, and they asked me how to pronounce it, and I didn't know, so I went on Wikipedia and took a guess. Look, once you get down to it, it's all duct tape. It's duct tape and WD-40.
You're right. It's all duct taped together, and we're all just kind of feeling around in the dark. When I lived in London and I worked at Google, that was jackpot city, because I sat on the floor with all the partner managers at YouTube for all of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So if I saw a name or a word, say in Italian, I would just go to the Italian YouTube partner representative, and I would say, how do you pronounce this? And he'd be like, basically, spaghetti and meatballs. I'm really good at Italian accents, by the way.
Not cultural stereotyping at all, Michael.
There were Germans, there were people from Iran, from Egypt. It was amazing. And it was so much more helpful than going on the internet and trying to find what to say. All right, so let me find out what to say next. I'm going to pull out a question for you, Hannah. How about this one? This one's from Tom. What are some assumptions about the universe that scientists rely on that might someday turn out to be wrong? And what false assumption would be the most devastating to the scientific community?
Okay, so I mean, we've already one assumption that it's Planck, not Planck. That's one. That's one.
And I'm devastated that we don't know.
Okay, I mean, there's a few of them. There's a few of them. I'm going to go a bit bigger than the university. I'm going to go for science in general. I think that there are lots of situations where people have theories that then end up forming the basis of I mean, the central basis of a lot of people's careers, right? So dark matter is one example of this, where when you make a calculation about how much gravity there should be to hold the galaxy together, there's loads of stuff missing. This matter that you can't see, hence dark matter. And so it began to really fill a hole in an equation. And now there are people who spend their entire careers studying, analysing, trying to decipher what dark matter is. No one's ever found it, but I mean there is sort of quite good evidence that something like that exists. But there is this rival theory that says, well, what if Einstein was just wrong? Like, what if, we were talking about scales earlier. What if Einstein works at the scale of the solar system but doesn't work at the scale of the galaxy? What if there is something else that's missing? So there are some other people who are working on this rival theory, which is called modified Newtonian dynamics. That says, actually, kick Einstein out. The whole phrase of like, oh, what are you, Einstein's not going to work anymore because we're just going to disprove everything that he ever came up with. I mean, that's one really big fundamental thing that would be pretty devastating to the entire scientific community.
But I hope that they can get past that devastation, because that's the only way you make progress. I mean, how exciting of an idea. I've never heard of this before. Modified Newtonian dynamics.
Yeah.
So the idea is that Einstein is once again just an approximation that's not good for big stuff. It's good for medium-sized stuff. And then we've got the quantum realm on one side and the galactic, transgalactic world on the other. Ah, interesting.
Yeah, because we already know that Einstein isn't a complete picture, exactly as you described, right? It doesn't capture things down at the small scale. So who's to say there's not another big scale above it?
Right. I always assume, look, we've got the top half figured out. It's the bottom half that we still need to marry to the big, and yet maybe we're still just eating the filling of the sandwich, and we don't know what the two slices of bread are doing.
Where is the bread, Michael? That's the question. I mean, there's other things like, okay, so at our scale, we make, and actually the scale of sort of galaxies and solar systems, we really make the assumption that time goes forwards only. You can't like smash a glass and reverse, right? It's sort of this unwritten rule. But the thing is that at the quantum realm, I think that they're slightly less comfortable with that as a baseline assumption. I mean, why should that be? And that, I think, is one that would really tear everything apart. There's also all the constants, like Planck's constant. Well,
Hey! I've heard of that before. I've said that before.
There's other constants about, for example, the way that electrons orbit an atom and the sort of strength of those forces. Who's to say that those constants have been constant throughout the entire history of the universe, right? Maybe, actually, we're seeing one snapshot in time of the way that they look, or one corner of the universe in which they look that way. All of these are fundamental assumptions that actually you still have to question, right? Like you can't just accept them as fact and move on, and I think that everything would fall apart there. But I think actually the reason why I wanted to go beyond just the universe on this is that I had one thought. There's this really brilliant piece in the Sunday Times that was about scientific publishing. And I think that this assumption that actually scientists rely on a lot is that the peer review process is great. That the way that scientists publish papers means that we end up with facts. And sometimes that looks on slightly shaky ground.
Right.
I think that's been an assumption for a long time, that scientific papers have been through such a rigorous process of peer review, other scientists checking the numbers, checking that they work. You can trust every single scientific paper. And I think that there are a few little cracks in that. There's quite a lot of duct tape down there as well. A lot of scientific retractions. Because the system isn't necessarily built for true stuff to come to the top,
New stuff, too. as a big barrier because, again, it's not God review, it's peer review. It's other people who have their own community expectations and paradigms that are shared.
Here's the thing, right? If you're a scientist, of course you're contributing to this great big body of knowledge. Of course you're advancing human understanding of the universe. But you're also trying to get a job. You're also, trying to get a research grant. And the thing is that to do the things that are, fundamentally and understandably selfish, sometimes they run counter to things that serve that wide range. You need to publish papers, you need to get a reputation, you need to be noticed internationally, you need to have people cite your work. And all of that is, you do best in that situation when you are pumping out papers, when you've got amazing data, when you're coming up with incredible results. And so there are basically incentives in the system for people to just fudge a little bit around the corners, just sort of maybe just tweak the data a tiny bit here and there, maybe publish the most interesting results that they're getting and not the boring ones.
Right.
And I'm not talking about necessarily direct manipulative behavior always here. I think sometimes it's sort of overlooking, there's confirmation bias, all of that kind of stuff. And the thing about the peer review system is that you're handing these papers that you're writing and you're handing them to volunteer scientists who've got their own stuff going on, who maybe don't have time or the expertise to go through and check every single number. And quite a lot of stuff slips through. So this article in the Times was really talking about the number of retractions that have happened in the scientific literature is increasing. And I think that with AI contributing to this landscape of just, making it a tiny bit easier to make your paper sound amazing, just making it a tiny bit easier to play with your data in a particular way.
Right.
The number of retractions is increasing.
Because AI, as an LLM specifically, is going to be able to write things that sound right. But this is what peer-reviewed papers tend to sound like. And so here's one, and it passes peer review because it's been engineered by an algorithm to sound like it should, and we don't wind up making any progress. We certainly don't do anything novel or revolutionary. I also wanted to say that I think we might discover that there are limits to what we do know that we don't currently know about. I think if we could prove in some Gödelian mathematical way, for example, that we will never know what consciousness is and whether one thing is conscious or not. That might actually be, for some really clever reason, beyond the ability of a fellow conscious being. And we're just going to be left in the dark, having to accept it on faith. And I think that I could see a far future where science is more about making people feel okay with what we cannot know. And it kind of takes the place of religion.
You're such an optimist. I definitely agree with you about the limits of human knowledge and about accepting the limits. I don't know.
No.
All right, here's one from the
Okay.
This is from Jacob. When hanging a poster on my office, why do I feel compelled to hang it at the centre? I could hang it anywhere. But why does it look best if equally between two endpoints? Is there an evolutionary reason for this? I've attached a photo of it hanging on my digital office.
Okay, let's show that photo. And then let's judge whether it's centered enough.
Let me tell you what we're looking at. So we've got this, it looks like one of those, it's been taken inside one of those sort of temporary buildings that you get on construction sites. That's sort of what it looks like. It's got it's a corner of a room. It's got sort of cream panelled walls. It has a window to one side, and then symmetrically between one of the wall panels hangs a glass framed photograph of a man with a guitar and a cowboy hat. Looks a bit like Bruce Springsteen from above.
First of all, I love that Jacob submitted a photo with his question, as though we would read his question and go, what do you mean centering a poster? I've never seen such a thing. I need a visual here. Oh, a poster. Now I know what you're talking about.
Thank you for that picture, Jacob. I mean, I would say that aesthetically, there's a bit of headroom there to go, isn't there, this?
Look, we don't need to judge Jacob's decoration, okay? He's asking about a psychological evolutionary phenomenon.
Yeah. I don't remember coming across Bruce Springsteen posters in the history of evolution, but maybe I missed that lecture.
Regardless of who it is, I think this is a really important question because I think it gets at like one of those like what is a human kind of things and why are we still here? Why did we not go extinct? I think that we really enjoy stuff that's difficult, stuff that is unnatural. I think we are a high skill based species where we don't hunt with the claws we're all born with. We have to like come up with strategies to hunt. And the only food sources available to these like little hairless naked apes that had no protection was the high skill stuff. Like let's get a mastodon or let's hunt an elephant. And that's going to require traps and cooperation and tools and spears and things that other animals just couldn't put together. And so humans that enjoyed things like, hey, look, this is symmetric or this is centered, did better when it came to surviving with such soft, fleshy bodies. So now we are their children, right? We also really enjoy when things are unnecessarily rule following, when they're centered, when they're symmetric. And this has been our story forever. One of my favorite mysteries is why so many ancient stone axes are symmetric when they didn't need to be. It's been shown that making these what do you call it? When you nap stone to make a sharp point, making it symmetric or bifaced or giving it the shape that they seemingly all have, took a lot more time than necessary to do the job of killing an animal or ripping the skin off the bone or the meat off the bone. And so the only explanation seems to be that we just thought it was cool looking, that it showed a level of skill that meant that we were good potential mates, that we were going to be good at other things that humans needed to be good at, like cooperation, planning, thinking ahead, imagining. So yeah, we want our posters to be centered because if we didn't, we would have gone extinct.
It's like I often think about the number of right angles there are in our lives.
Yeah.
Because nature does not have right angles. Then you don't find them. I mean, maybe very occasionally it's a fluke, but in every room, in every building you ever walk into, in every object that you own, in every space that you encounter, we are surrounded by them, surrounded by this thing that is the most unnatural human invention. And I totally agree with you. It's like, why are we so obsessed with right angles? It's because they're symmetrical, it's because they're neat, it's because there's this precision to them that we are completely drawn to. I totally agree.
That's right. There's an unnatural precision that shows a mastery of something that requires more skill than any other animal would require. And that's us. The only way we could survive was by having that high skill.
So there you go, actually. I started off by slagging off your Bruce Springsteen poster, but actually now you've got the line of your window, you've got the really sad foam panels in the ceiling. You've got right angles and symmetry all over the place, Jacob. You are demonstrating yourself as uniquely human.
I'm trying to make this picture bigger. Okay, so it's not Bruce Springsteen. It's a guy in a cowboy hat.
Maybe it's Jacob himself.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool? And we're sitting here not admiring it enough.
Oh, hold on a second. Now that we've zoomed in, it's not Bruce Springsteen at all. It's Clint Black. Okay, this is a signed poster. Actually, he says it in his email. A signed poster from 1990. I don't know who Clint Black is, but I know what he looks like now, thanks to this image. This time I've got another question for you, Michael. How many holes does a straw have?
1.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, if we're talking about topological holes that cannot be removed by gluing or ripping, 1.
This is a topic of much debate on the internet, you know, of how many holes does a straw have? Because as you say, some people say 1. It's just, you know, you look through it, it's a hole, it's done. Other people say that there's 2 because there's one on this end and there's one on the other end. And in many ways, both groups of people, I think, have a point. Sort of.
They have a point. I mean, you know, I did a video on how many holes a human has. And I think the bottom line is that here's what a hole is. It's a word. We made it up, and it can mean whatever we want. And most of these debates are around what the word should mean. Should it mean like an individual entrance, or is there some better definition? So look, by using a mathematical definition of a hole, the straw has 1. You can imagine taking one end of the straw and stretching it open so that you wind up with a plate with a hole in the middle. Then it's really obvious that you've got 1 hole.
I mean, of course, you are absolutely right. I'm going to come to your video on how many holes a human has in a moment, if I may.
I'm really curious about what object you brought. We're jumping right into holes.
Oh yeah,
which we've established matters a lot to me.
It does, evidently. Okay, but really, what I want to talk about here is topology, which is basically the Alice in Wonderland of mathematical ideas. It's where you take a shape, and the rules are that you can bend it and stretch it and deform it as much as you like, but you cannot cut it, right? You cannot cut it, you cannot rip it, you cannot crease it. And then people have these arguments extensively about how many holes things like straws or t-shirts or trousers have. Now, okay, while I agree with you that fundamentally I think that a straw has 1 hole, you could say, well, hold on a second. If I cover up one end here, if I pinch one end of the straw, now how many holes does it have? Because it's sort of, you could say that it sort of does still have a hole. There's sort of a hole on the end, no?
Right. Okay, so, I mean, I would say that, first of all, you have pinched a hole shut, all right? So you're no longer talking about topology because you've committed a heteromorphism. It's now a different shape. You have glued one end shut, and you don't have a hole anymore. You have a blind hole, which is a hole that you cannot go all the way through. But those can be removed by just, you know, moving the thing around like clay.
Okay, sure, but then hold on a second. What about this glass? Does this glass have a hole in it?
No.
Why not? What are you talking about? It's got a hole right there.
Yeah, but I can get rid of that hole without needing to use any glue or scissors. I can just, if we imagine that the glass is made of clay, I can open its orifice larger and larger until the whole thing is flat and it's a plate.
Okay, so this is I think the fundamental key point. The 2 ways that you can look at this straw. One is that you can say that the surface is 2-dimensional, that the paper around the outside is 2D, and you can imagine blowing up this straw until it's the size of a balloon. Okay, so it's like this big round balloon. At which point then there are these 2 circles that are cut into it. Those are boundaries, right? So I think that, exactly as you pointed out at the beginning, the problem is that the word hole means 2 different things. Sometimes it means tunnel, and sometimes it means a boundary. So you could say that this straw, if it was the shape of a balloon, blown up to the shape of a balloon, would have 2 circles cut in it, 2 boundaries, essentially. And so that is like the argument in favor of the people who say that a straw has 2 holes, one at each end.
What field of mathematics worries about holes as boundaries? Because I do appreciate the difference between these 2 conceptions. A topologist would say this shape still has just 1 hole.
I think it's still a topologist. It's just the topologist is on looking at the surface rather than a three-dimensional object. No,
I'm not sure. I think you're right.
I don't know for definite. I would say topologist, but maybe I'm wrong. The other way to look at this straw is to say, okay, well, imagine it was made of plasticine. At which point you could also cut off a tiny bit of it, make it shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until you had just a little ring that was left over. At which point you're like, that's definitely got one hole. I mean, you're kind of crazy to imagine anything else. It's the same shape as a donut. A donut obviously has one hole.
Right.
So those are the two different ways to look at it, right? As though the surface is paper, two-dimensional, or the surface is a sort of physical object itself, a three-dimensional object itself.
If we blow the straw up to a balloon, I like this way of thinking about it because now we've got seemingly two boundaries. Though a topologist would say, but I could put my fingers into one of those boundaries and pull it and stretch the balloon until it was just a circle with a hole in the middle, one hole.
Right, so this is exactly it, right? Is that it's like you've got two boundaries on the surface, but if you consider that the whole object is like solid, then it's one tunnel. So there's a difference between boundaries and tunnels, which is where the confusion comes in. So, okay, it's all right, it's not so bad on a straw, but what about a t-shirt? How many holes does a t-shirt have?
Well, it has 3 holes, right? It's got 4 openings. The head hole and the torso hole, top and bottom, are like one hole. But then it's got 2 more openings that join the central cavity of that hole, the armholes. So you can imagine shuffling them around and creating 3 very distinct through holes in a t-shirt.
I really think the blowing it up into the balloon thing is really helpful here, because if you imagine taking a t-shirt and blowing up into a balloon, then you've got 4 circles cut on the balloon.
That's right.
Exactly. But you're right that if the t-shirt itself is like made of plasticine, then essentially you have one tunnel, one central tunnel from top to bottom, and then 2 additional tunnels that join that tunnel. So 3 holes. Okay, so mathematicians love playing around with these ideas of like taking really kind of crazy, intricate shapes, manipulating them, asking whether a sphere can pass through itself, asking whether you can like invert a donut, all of these kind of things. But the reason why this is fun and the reason why this matters, I think, is because of what happened with early life in the universe. Because it was basically playing this topological game. The earliest organisms, they tried to digest food in a sort of as though they're a sack, right? So sort of imagine, jellyfish here or anemones, okay? So they eat with the same hole, that kind of goes into their stomach, they digest it, and then they sort of basically spit this waste out the same hole, which is inefficient. Pooping and eating out of the same hole is not a good idea, I would say.
Yeah, I don't need to be told that.
And then around about 550 million years ago, right? Like, quite a long time ago, there was this worm-like creature that it was the first one that did this really incredibly revolutionary thing. It essentially evolved a second boundary, but in effect made the hole into a tunnel. So it stopped being like a poke into the body of the creature and actually became a tunnel.
A tunnel all the way through. So this creature, how long ago did it emerge?
550 million years ago.
That doesn't seem that long ago, to be honest. For the first butthole? For the first living donut?
The first butthole.
That's great. That's cool.
The first butthole. Michael, I love working with you. You're so right. That is the evolution of the butthole. Is that what we call this video?
We haven't even been around for 1 billion years.
Anyway, the butthole as an innovation was genius. Okay, so much of life on the planet. I mean, basically every creature that you can imagine that eats at one end and then ejects waste at the other is like following this same moment of revolution. And this is the thing, now you can eat continuously, right? What you've done is you've turned yourself topologically into a different shape, and now you can have this like assembly line of food. And that is what allowed animals to get way bigger and way more complex.
It's a miracle. That's why I think eating on the toilet is almost a religious experience. It's a celebration of the fundamental donutness of my body.
Yeah, right? Because we are like squish us down. We are all these donut shapes. It's also though the reason why our brains and our eyes and our nose and our mouth are all in the same place. Because think of us as though we are just a tube that's existing through the world that's like continually looking for food. Sort of imagine us worm-shaped, right? And we are all of our sensors packed up towards the like entrance to our like fundamental tube.
Yeah, that's right.
It creates a bit of a problem though, because you need the tube, the kind of the esophagus, to like go through the middle, right? You want the brain to kind of exist all the way around the tube. You don't want the brain on one side and nothing on the other. So there are some very simple animals, even arthropods, I think, where the esophagus literally goes through the middle of their brain. So if they swallow a chunk of food that is too big, they can give themselves brain damage, which is not great.
I'm glad that's not us.
Do you know how humans worked out a way around it? Well, not humans, but I mean mammals more generally.
No, how?
So if you think we have like our kind of, you're eating through your mouth, you have your breathing through your nose, which is above your mouth. But then once it gets to your throat, they have to swap over. You have to go to your lungs.
The nose goes into the sinuses.
Yeah.
And they all connect in the throat, the mouth hole and the nose hole. But then there is a division between the esophagus and the trachea for air and food. And for humans, that's a dangerous connection. It's much easier for us to choke than like a dog or a bear.
But you know, I thought I understood this, and now I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure I completely do this little bit. Oh, there we go. Look at this.
Yeah, so here you can see the mouth opens up and comes down this way into the throat. But the nose goes into this big open area called the sinus. Yeah. And this connects back into the throat as well. They come down, and then here we have this division between the esophagus and the trachea. So air that we breathe comes down here to the lungs, and food is squeezed by the muscles in the esophagus to get to the stomach.
So here's the problem, is that you need the stomach to go in the middle of the body, right? But at the nose, it's like the airway is on top. It's kind of at the back, as it were. And then they switch over, they cross over in that section where the air supply starts to come to the front, right? So originally it's at the back, and now it comes to the front. You've got this crossover, the switch over. And it's the topological solution to the fact that we need our brains to be around our whole body. You need the tube to be in the center. And how do you do it?
Yeah.
Are you with me?
I'm with you. And it makes me appreciate the existential quality of choking, that it's fundamentally because of this crossover that has to happen.
The crossover has to happen, exactly. The brain's on top, the nerve cord is on the bottom. You've got to have your connecting nerves physically to wrap around the esophagus to link up so that the brain can act around the entire body. And so what you end up with is this like switch over. All right, so we're all these tubes munching along, eyes and ears and stuff all at the top. But then we also, of course, have breathing apparatus attached, right? Our noses. Now, I know that you have done a video on this. Tell me, how many holes are there in the human body, in topological terms?
Okay, to make it brief, I'll say that we need to define how big something has to be a hole. Like if a single blood cell can pass through it, then the body has millions of holes, right? The urethra is a hole because you can get up into the bladder, through the ureters, to the kidneys, blah, 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 blah. So I think we need to go bigger than that. If we go 60 microns, all right, the thickness of a human hair, if it can come in one hole and come out another, we've got ourselves a through hole. And as it turns out, humans have 8 entrances, meaning we have 7 topological holes.
7 topological holes. Ears don't count, paws don't count, female reproductive organs don't count.
That's right, the ears don't count because the eardrum blocks any continuous passage from the ear into anything else. At the scale of a human hair, right? A neutrino can pass right through the eardrum. A neutrino can pass right through reproductive organs and go wherever it wants. But a little spaceship 60 microns wide, it's gonna be like, guys, we're stuck. We've got 8 ways in and out, and that means we've got 7 holes.
There was a program that I was doing a few years ago about evolution, and we were talking about how all creatures were tubes. I mentioned the fact that you had done this 7-holed human thing and was extremely excited by it and just absolutely loved it. And so, I also, by the way, at the time was quite obsessed with wood turning videos. On the internet, which I'd also mentioned on the show. Anyway, someone made me, wood-turned me, a topological model of a human body. Oh, it's beautiful. Isn't that gorgeous?
You know, it looks like the cylinder of a revolver. There's a central hole that it could pivot around, and then there are 6 holes for the 6 bullets. And that's the human body. Topologically, that's the same thing. We haven't discussed what these other 6 holes are. Like, we know that there's this hole from the mouth to the anus, but there are 6 more tunnels that all join in to that same tube. 2 of them are the nostrils. You've got your left and your right nostrils. They meet together in the sinuses, and then they connect up with the throat. And then you have, on both eyes, you have 2 holes that are called your lacrimal punctum, and they absorb your tears. If you're actually crying, they can't keep up, and so the tears come down onto your face. But normally, the wetness of your eyes it's like squirted on the eye, and then it drains through these 2 holes we have at the corners of our eyes. And that goes into the sinuses as well.
Back of your throat.
That's why when you get really teary, your nose runs. A lot of that crying, nose running liquid is actually tears that are in your nose now. So you've got those 4 puncta, 2 in each eye, 2 nostrils. That's the 6 holes that all join up, and they are greater than 60 microns across. So they fit my definition of a hole that you can travel through. Stick a hair through and pull it out somewhere else. So that's all 7 of them. You've got the...
Here you go. Mouth to bum, right here, in the middle.
That's the middle one, let's say, yeah. And then you've got the 2 nostrils.
Nostril, right there.
And then you've got the 4 lacrimal puncta.
Left eye, right eye, human.
Yep. And they all connect, but you can, and this is hard to do if you're just listening, but you can imagine all of those tunnels being morphed and continuously deformed away from each other to form exactly the shape Hannah is holding. That's us.
That's us, right there. Just the really loving right angles as well. This is us and right. This and right angles. That's the whole description of humanity that you ever need. You know what? Forget about the Arecibo. This is what we should have sent.
Yeah, they would have gotten it. Like, in general, this is us.
I mean, it'd be better than the other one they sent, frankly.
We could have sent a board of wood with 2 holes drilled in it and said, this is our pants. Drill a 3rd hole, it's a shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless it's a button-up shirt, in which case the first one would do.
Ooh, yes. And by the way, like, we all in general have 7 holes, but if you've got piercings, those add additional holes.
Oh gosh. Oh, they do. You're absolutely right. I need to put in a teeny tiny, especially a nose piercing. I need to put in a teeny tiny one in there.
And not to get too into the weeds, but some people have additional holes through their sinuses. I forget what the medical term is for it, but we don't really know if we have them unless we've had like scans or like nasal problems. But you can live your whole life not knowing that you've got an 8th hole hidden inside your head.
Or someone with 2 buttholes.
There aren't many of them, but I met some people that I've been suspicious. I'm like, you've got 2 in there, don't you?
You're talking out of your second butthole.
Yeah, it requires a whole different language, but it's possible.
Now that we've done an evolutionary history of the butthole, I think we put this episode to bed, Michael. That was an enjoyable romp.
Well, let's flesh all of it. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you've got your 7+ holes, and we hope to bring them back next time.
Certainly do. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer, anything you want to send us in, you can send us anything you like. The rest is science@gohanning.com.
And you can join our newsletter at therestis.com/science.
We're going to be back next Thursday with another edition of Field Notes, and on Tuesday with our usual normal episode where we will not be talking about buttholes. Stay there.
Probably not. But until then, stay curious.
Bienvenido a Reacciones, Investigaciones y Perspectivas. Yo soy tu creador de contenido, creador de relleno, independiente y emergente favorito, Mateus Bolso Rosarín. El patrocinador de este video es el tren. Mis compadres, saludos, ¿cómo están? Saludos. No, la verdad es que ellos no necesitan patrocinios. El tren no necesita patrocinios, el tren es una fuerza en sí misma. Si no conoces el tren, vete al canal de Roberto Martínez y busca la playlist del tren y ahí vas a ver que hay muchos episodios con mis compadres, con mi hermano Diego Rosarín, con Maurice Dieck, Farid Dieck y el gran Roberto Martínez. Me da mucho gusto y un gran honor, es un gran honor por parte del tren. Pero más bien el patrocinador de este episodio de RIP es Nietzsche, el bigotón, el Ubersmensch, que la verdad era un hombre muy frágil, muy problemado, muy enfermo. Pero bueno, sí, fuera las bromas, vamos a pasar a un poquito de leer comentarios. Como de costumbre, voy a leer 2 comentarios y luego voy a pasar a la lectura de Nietzsche. Hoy vamos a terminar La verdad y la mentira en un sentido extramoral. Nos toca leer el capítulo número 2. Está cortito, pero está muy sólido, está chido. Pero bueno, chido, no sé si México se dice chido, el norte de México. En fin, 2 comentarios. Esos comentarios vienen del video de Rip58, cómo sería una vida inmortal. Sergio, de ahí dije que me iba a salir del internet. Y sí, algún día me quiero salir del internet. No sé cómo ni cuándo, pero sí me gustaría. Sergio dice: Mateus, respeto a tus videos, la forma en la que nos haces pensar, los temas súper importantes que tratas. Todo tu trabajo divulgativo tiene un valor, un impacto que no se mide con los números de una plataforma tecnofeudalista. Es infinitamente más trascendental que eso. Gracias, estimado Sergio. A lo mejor el burnout hace efecto por la gran cantidad de contenido que quieres hacer en poco tiempo, pero que no te gane la pulsión hacia acelerar el contexto actual. Eso ya nos ganó a todos, pero vos tenés que preservar por el bien de nuestra especie. Muchísimas gracias, Sergio, de corazón. Espero que tus ganas de compartir conocimientos ciudadanos ayuden en la lucha por nuestra soberanía cognitiva. Soberanía cognitiva, me gusta. Te mando un abrazo inmenso desde Salta, Argentina. Un abrazo, Salta, Argentina. Tranquilo, Sergio, no te preocupes. Cuando me saturo o me canso de hacer RIP, paro, no te preocupes. Pero por lo pronto, uno al día, sí lo puedo hacer. De hecho, hoy estoy haciendo dos. Hice uno en la mañana y voy a hacer otro en la tarde. Pero bueno, Cas, el segundo comentario, dice: hola Mateus, me encanta cuando te metes a temas sobre inteligencia artificial. Es refrescante escuchar hablar de tecnología desde un lente tan normal de nosotros, personal. Aprecio mucho más que primero hayas dedicado tus años a estudiar y después a las redes. Eso es justo lo que hace falta hoy en día. Expertos que de verdad saben de lo que hablan, en lugar de gente que se las da de gurú sin tener bases. Gracias por el comentario, sé por dónde vas. Estoy estudiando todo este tema. No me considero un experto, pero hago lo mejor para traerles con la máxima calidad lo que sí sé y decirles lo que no sé, ¿verdad? Para que investiguen. Entonces, esa es mi promesa. Gracias. Yo sé por dónde vas. Sobre lo que mencionas de las redes, no sé si sabías, tal vez sí, y por eso esa desconexión con las adicciones, pero cuando aprendí esto, cambié mi perspectiva sobre las redes. Funcionan con algo llamado programas de recompensa variable. He leído sobre el tema a través de los años, pero así que tengo un artículo que ya deja todo claro, no lo tengo, pero vamos a ver qué nos dices. Es básicamente lo mismo que una máquina tragamonedas. He escuchado esta teoría. Esa incertidumbre de no saber qué viene después es lo que te mantiene scrolleando, qué sigue, qué más hay, sí, esa novedad. He leído sobre el tema, disparando microdosis de dopamina. Sí, gran tesis. Ahora, creo que no es solamente dopamina, creo que es más complicado, más sofisticado que dopamina. Si quieres lo podemos investigar, los neurotransmisores que nos mandan a redes sociales. Creo que hay serotonina, oxitocina no, pero otras investigar. No está tan sencillo como la dopamina, pero definitivamente es una parte de la conversación. Al final, el contenido digital dispara dopamina de la misma forma que lo hace otra adicción, solo que a menor escala. Entonces sí, por eso definitivamente pues el cigarro es como un golpe chiquito de placer, llamémoslo así. Qué miedo que no sea conocimiento común, ¿no? Debería tener labels de comida. El exceso de microdosis de dopamina puede ser perjudicial así. Ok, sí, ella me acuerdo que en su LinkedIn comentó precisamente esto de poner ahí en los modelos qué te pueden hacer, como la comida. En fin, y sobre el trabajo en línea, mi opinión es que veo que lo estás haciendo es habitar ese espacio centro. No estás alimentando el algoritmo por alimentar, estás dominando las reglas del juego para hackearlo desde adentro. Sí estoy tratando, si han visto mis thumbnails y mis títulos, sí son medio clickbaiteros, trato de llamar la atención como lo hacen todos los demás en YouTube, ¿verdad? Porque necesito traerlos a entender lo que hago. Si les gusta se quedan, si no se van. Pero en fin, creo que te mueves en esa intersección entre educación y rebeldía hacia la tecnología, que concuerdo contigo, usando los medios actuales para obligar al sistema a darle espacio académico y filosófico en lugar de contenido basura. Estamos, tú exponiendo muchos interactivos viviendo, forzando el centro a escuchar una historia distinta y convirtiendo el consumo rápido en un acto de reflexión. Gracias, Cas. Es precisamente por ahí donde va mi trabajo. Seguiré dedicándome consistente y diligente. Gracias por todo lo que haces. Una gota de contenido intelectual, un mar de contenido diseñado para atrofiar a tus cerebritos. Tus cerebros fantásticos, todos tienen cerebros increíbles. Y como tú dices, hacer accesible lo que no es accesible. Gracias totales por el comentario. Sí, la verdad es que ese es mi esfuerzo. Puede parecer también ridículo para algunos, porque pues somos pocos, pero ahí vamos, pero hay una prisa, como les he dicho, ¿verdad? Espacio que traemos, al revés, sí tenemos prisa en muchas cosas, pero vamos despacio que traemos prisa, es la frase que decía la esposa, para hacer las cosas bien a la primera. En fin, vamos a quién hacer las cosas bien a la primera. Buscar hacerlas de la mejor forma posible y reflexionar sobre ello. Ok, capítulo 2. Como hemos visto en la construcción de los conceptos, estamos leyendo a Nietzsche, me tengo que cambiar el chip. Como hemos visto en la construcción de los conceptos, trabaja originalmente cómo trabaja originalmente el lenguaje. Creo que hay un error ahí. Originalmente el lenguaje. Más tarde.
So for over a year now, I think a lot of people who are pretty informed on how economies work have felt like it's pretty weird that the other shoe has not dropped yet. We've got a government that feels kind of unpredictable. We've got tariffs, like big new tariffs. Also, those tariffs themselves feel very unpredictable. You got people who had previously had their student loans deferred, no longer having them deferred. You got people who used to have government jobs, no longer having those government jobs. But as a person who is really involved in the running of a couple of small organizations, this unpredictability piece of this is like a really big deal. It's like big cost for a business, especially if you're running a small business where you can't just like call up a lobbyist and get an exemption. You can't shift production between 3 different continents. You can't finance a sudden inventory pile up because you're worried that the rules are going to change next Tuesday. And so there's a big mystery here because markets are up. Jobs are not collapsing. They're like, okay. Spending seems okay. People are still buying stuff. Online holiday spending in 2025? Higher than ever. Now, the labor market has cooled. You can find plenty of stories about slowing hiring and rising uncertainty. But broadly, the story as it stands is this thing is still chugging along a lot more than people seem to have expected. So why? And I've heard a few explanations that I think are good explanations. I also have a hypothesis that I want to run by everybody that I think is terrifying. But we'll talk about the explanations I've heard that I think are pretty good. One, the AI investment boom. There's a lot of real money going into the real economy to build data centers and buy chips and power infrastructure and do the software and everything downstream of all of that. A bunch of different economic analysis has shown that this has been a big contributor to the macro situation in the US. It accounted for a lot of the private demand growth in the first half of 2025. Latter half of 2025? Probably. We don't have that data yet. There's also like an interesting fiscal tailwind right now, and that is in tax policy. What we are doing is we are taxing people less. We've lowered taxes, especially on the wealthy, and we're financing that through deficit spending. And that can keep demand high when things would otherwise slow down. And that's especially true if a lot of the economy is propped up by wealthy households. The Wall Street Journal reported that the top 10% of earners drive about half of consumer spending because people with assets are doing quite well. If you have money in the stock market, you have a lot more money than you used to have. And you can just sell some stocks and go on vacation, sell some stocks, buy a new car. They have money to spend. So stock prices are doing well. They stay high, then high earners are able to keep spending. You get an economy that looks kind of fine in aggregate when a lot of small businesses and a lot of normal people are not feeling fine. And all of that feels like it makes sense to me, and it tells like a fairly coherent story. I have an addition that I'd like to propose. This is dangerous because I'm just a guy. And there's like a weaker version of this hypothesis that I feel like is pretty true, and I've actually heard it from other places. And there's like a stronger version that, if it is true, I feel like is bad, like really bad. So I'm going to tell you my little guess here, and then I'm going to talk to an actual economist about whether I'm totally off the line. And spoiler, if I discover that there's nothing to this, I will not release it as I have just recorded it. But I think that you should stick around for that conversation to see what holes we poke in my ideas here. So let's start with a weaker claim that this is just a kind of political physics. The markets, we're going to talk about the markets a lot here, but these are human beings, and they are broadly, we're going to talk about this a little later, but broadly fairly sympathetic to Donald Trump. They think that he's going to be good for them, and I think in part because they like understand the incentives here. And Trump, his popularity, his success is very much tied to the market not collapsing, to there not being an economic downturn. And so the markets, these people who are in charge of like buying and selling and sort of set a lot of the prices, they know that Trump will back off if the markets freak out. They know Trump won't do something. It would be very self-destructive for him to make decisions that would actually result in an economic downturn. And not just that, but that he's going to make a lot of decisions to make that not happen in whatever way he can, because a lot of his power, this is always true of a president, but specifically for Donald Trump, who has a lot of his credibility built on him being a good businessman, for whatever that's worth. I think that the markets understand, that President Trump understands, that if the economy turns down, it will be very bad for the amount of power that he has. He likes having power. He will do whatever he can to have the economy not have a downturn. And that includes exercising a lot of power that a normal president might not exercise, including putting a lot of pressure on other things. They're doing a lot of things that he should not technically have the ability to do. Basically, if the president's power depends on the economy looking good, and if markets are one of the loudest and fastest feedback mechanisms we have, then investors can rationally believe that there is a limit to how much pain the White House will tolerate. And that comes straight down to self-interest. So the market can price in a kind of back-off button. And we saw this early on. Last April, after the administration's tariff day that they had, Trump announced a 90-day pause on a lot of the tariffs, and then the S&P 500 had its biggest daily gain since 2008. So that's the basic weaker claim, that Donald Trump will do whatever he can to keep the economy humming along. And also, he is proven to be good at exercising a lot more power than previous presidents, so the markets believe that this very powerful force will continue to support it. I've heard a lot of people say that there's something happening in the direction of Donald Trump needs the economy to hold on to his power. But there is another portion of that cycle, which he has a lot of power, and so he knows he has to keep the economy going, so he will keep the economy going. And the markets understand that there's a lot of power in the administration and that it will work very hard to keep the economy going. It's a circular thing. Do you see how it goes both ways? Trump needs the economy needs Trump. And so one of the things that might be keeping the economy humming along is knowing that there is a strong man who has a great deal of power and is not afraid to use it, and he will do whatever it takes to keep the economy humming along. And you see this in little details, like Trump has exemptions on electronics like smartphones and computers and semiconductors, and that's like a lot of the big companies that are responsible for a lot of the increase in the market, like in the S&P 500. So he's working hard to protect the things that at least make it look like the economy is still good. So even if tariffs and chaos and firing a bunch of government employees is bad for the real economy, investors feel like there's a line that the administration won't cross, and also that there's lots of stuff that they will do to keep supporting the economy, because the Trump administration isn't going to threaten its own political power by letting the economy collapse. And that's a big buoy for the market. It lowers the perceived risk. If you feel like there's a guy who has a whole lot of power in charge of the country, he's not going to let that downturn happen, and he will bully whoever he needs to, fire whoever he needs to, even investigate whoever he needs to, do a little bit of power that he shouldn't be wielding here and there to keep it going for his whole 4 years. I think it's a lot of an incentive, especially for the kinds of people who are involved in finance, who tend to be more sort of aligned politically with Donald Trump, and who do a lot of incentives-based thinking. I think that this makes sense, that this structure would result in the short term in a more stable economy than you would otherwise expect. But that is not the strong claim that I want to make. The riskier claim that I'd like to make here is far more worrying. But first, this video is brought to you by my newsletter. It's called We're Here. You get it once a week, every Friday. It comes in and it delivers to you some of the coolest things that I've found from the internet, some introductory thoughts either from me or from my brother John, and also often a little blog post from the amazing people at Our Golden Data. It is a human-curated thing that's delivered to your email inbox for you to look at it on once a week. Check it out. There's a link in the description. It doesn't cost any money, and it doesn't even have any advertising. I make negative dollars from this thing, but I do want people to sign up for it because I think that it's good. All right, thank you. So here's the strong claim. It's not Trump will work really hard to avoid a crash, and not even Trump will, do some underhanded things to exercise his power in ways that might not technically be aligned with how the country's supposed to work according to the Constitution to keep that from happening. There are some really big companies that are responsible for a lot of the economy, and they would like to be exposed to less risk, have more opportunity for cheaper. And what if biggest companies can do relatively cheap things to signal loyalty and proximity to Trump, and in return they get access to the levers of power. And that access reduces their risk and increases their upside. This is not the back off button. There's a couple words for this.